Hey everybody, thanks for checking into this video, recording this on Thursday morning at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana. And yesterday, John Lynch spoke to the media as a whole. He did about probably 15 minutes up at the podium, surrounded by national people and the locals who are here. And then after that, he went into a back room where about a handful of us 49ers beat reporters were able to talk to him further on additional subjects. And then I was able to get him for about 15 minutes for the 49ers Talk podcast. So check that out anywhere you get your podcast. So on this, I'm just going to summarize all of the topics, or a good deal of the topics, that John Lynch covered during his times speaking to the media on Wednesday. First time that he has spoken to the media since the Wednesday following the regular season. 49ers obviously finished with a 6-11 record. So there's a lot of things that have happened and are continuing to happen for the 49ers this offseason. Obviously a pivotal offseason for them. The NFL free agent signing period opens up on March 12th, with the open negotiating period March 10 and 11. And so that's kind of critical. The 49ers have sole negotiating rights with their own free agents up until March 10. So that includes Dre Greenlaw. I'll talk a little bit about him, Charvarius Ward, Aaron Banks, Talanoa Hufanga, and all the others who are free agents. So let's kind of get going first with the very first question asked of him was about Brock Purdy and where that stands. Obviously, Purdy is available. He's eligible for a contract, a new contract this offseason for the first time. 49ers and Purdy will arrive at some contract. I'm certain of that. The timing remains to be seen, and what that contract looks like remains to be seen. But what John Lynch said is that they have started negotiations with Brock Purdy's agent, Kyle Strongen. Said they're talking. He's not going to go into the negotiations, how they're going. That's always the 49ers stance. But he did confirm, or just kind of reiterate, that he wants Brock Purdy to be the 49ers quarterback as long as they're there, and beyond that. And he said, we'll just leave it at that. The other big topic, and I think something will happen with this sooner than what happens with Brock Purdy, I would suspect, or maybe they happen around the same time, but I think there's a real deadline on Deebo Samuel, and that is at the start of the free agent signing period. Deebo Samuel, the 49ers are going to trade him, or at least they're looking to trade him. What John Lynch says is that Deebo Samuel asked for a fresh start, and I think we're going to honor that. He said he hates seeing good players leave. He considers Deebo Samuel one of his favorite draft picks in his time with the 49ers. And he said that everything is amicable. They're on very good terms, but they are committed to seeing through with that trade and finding Deebo Samuel a new home. He says there's a lot of interest in Deebo Samuel from teams that he has spoken with. Now, on the podcast, I asked John about, he did request a trade back 3 years ago, but he said that he didn't feel like that trade request was real. This time, when he expressed his reasons for wanting to leave the 49ers, John Lynch told him to sleep on it and let's talk later. And he said the team would do the same thing. And the team agreed that this was the time. And he said, it's just, time happens, I believe is what he said. And it does feel like the team and Deebo have grown apart, and it's probably best for both sides just to move forward and do stuff on their own. Okay. Dre Greenlaw is a free agent. John Lynch was very adamant that they are very interested in having Dre Greenlaw back. So we'll see what that looks like. He also suggested that is a very strong possibility, if not a likelihood, that Dre Greenlaw will hit the open market to see what his value is for other teams. So I don't expect the 49ers and Dre Greenlaw to arrive at a contract agreement before the start of free agency. So expect Dre Greenlaw to hit the market. 49ers still want to bring him back. Also, George Kittle. 49ers are they're committed, I think, and obviously Kittle's side is committed to getting a new contract this offseason. That one's been pushed back to the back burner because of the other stuff that is of more urgency: Purdy, Samuel, etc., Greenlaw, etc. But what John Lynch said, and this is what George Kittle said at the end of the season too, that he wants to be a San Francisco 49ers player for his entire career. And Lynch said that too. He says, we want George to retire a 49er. He's just one of those guys. He's a 49er through and through. So they want that to become a reality. They've told George and his agent that that's what they want to do. So the idea is at some point this offseason, George Kittle is entering the final year of his contract. The idea is at some point this offseason, sides get together, work out a contract extension to keep George Kittle under contract for the foreseeable future. No worries about Trent Williams stepping away from the 49ers or retiring at age, 36? What John Lynch said, that he's playing and he thinks he's ready and he's motivated to come back and play well. Trent Williams missed the final 7 games of last season. And when I asked John Lynch later about the state of the offensive line and what they have to do to improve that, the one thing he said is our offensive line is a lot better when Trent Williams is at left tackle. So there is that. Christian McCaffrey is doing very well. Of course, he was cleared to play last season. He played in 4 games, and then he went out of the lineup in that game against Buffalo with a totally different injury, a PCL knee injury, as opposed to the bilateral, that both Achilles tendonitis injuries that sidelined him throughout training camp and the first, 8 games of the regular season. But what John Lynch said about McCaffrey is that he's doing great. He expects him to be available for the offseason program, or at least parts of it, but they're going to be very judicious and follow the medical team's advice. But he says that McCaffrey has done a very good job in rehab. And the same goes for Brandon Ayuk. Now, in a couple of weeks, he's going to have a follow-up exam to see where he is with the ACL, and they'll have a better idea as far as the time frame for Brandon Ayuk at that time. But he said anecdotally, he sees Brandon Ayuk, he's working out with the team's trainers, and he's doing very well, and he's putting in the work. So there is optimism about Brandon Ayuk returning to form sooner than later. Does that mean the start of the regular season? Does that mean toward the end of training camp? I don't know. But the 49ers will have a better idea of that in a couple of weeks when he has a follow-up examination. Drake Jackson, it's not as encouraging with him. He had the surgery a year ago on his quad patellar situation, very similar to, I believe, to the Weston Richburg injury, very similar to Mike McGlinchey. And I think the 49ers are really going to revisit this in the future if they have players with that injury, whether surgery is the best way to go, because it certainly sounds like McGlinchey didn't necessarily help him or ameliorate that problem. For Drake Jackson, what John Lynch said was he hasn't necessarily had any setbacks, but he's just had trouble coming back. So it has not been the most encouraging thing. They're hoping that this takes a positive turn, because what he said was, we've seen Drake when he's healthy, and he can be a really effective player for us. Javon Hargrave, of course, signed a long-term contract with the 49ers a couple of years ago as a free agent. He has had his contract redone. He will be available on the open market. Doesn't sound like the 49ers really expect to be in competition for him. What John Lynch said was he expects a very robust defensive tackle market in free agency. So I think the 49ers are very prepared for Javon Hargrave not to be on the team. What lines up well for them is that it's a very strong group of defensive tackles in the NFL draft. So certainly they can hit on 1 or 2 of those guys among their 10 scheduled draft picks. Kyle Juszczyk, John Lynch he was kind of non-committal. Last year, they asked him to take a pay cut, and they were prepared to release him if he didn't. He didn't say whether the 49ers were going to do the same thing this year, but he did kind of reiterate that Juszczyk has been a big part of this 49ers team. So we'll see what the future holds there. We'll also see what the future holds for Jordan Mason. 49ers can tender him 1 of 3 spots as a restricted free agent. They can tender him at the first round level, which means if another team signs him, 49ers will get a first round pick in return. That would be $7.5 million, right around there. Or they could do a second round tender. That would be $5.5 million. Something right around there, or just a right of first refusal. That's $3.5 million, or they just don't tender him at all. What Lynch said, or you can agree to a contract. And so there's a lot of different options that they can do there. Lynch said they're exploring all of those options, but he said Jordan played at a very good level when Christian McCaffrey was out. So we'll see what they're able to do there. As far as a couple of coaching things, Robert Saleh back with the 49ers. Lynch said that he believes that Saleh is an even better coach now, having gone through the experiences he had with the New York Jets as a head coach. So he said it's a welcome sight to have him back, that energy he brings, the expertise he brings, and the leadership he brings. The one surprise on the outside anyway was Brian Griese not back as 49ers quarterbacks coach. Now, when Griese decided to basically leave broadcasting, he was fired as the analyst on Monday Night Football as they brought another team in. But Kyle Shanahan reached out to Brian Griese, brought him in as quarterbacks coach, and Griese gave him a 3-year commitment to be quarterbacks coach. Although there was some uncertainty after year one whether he even wanted to come back for year two, but he did fulfill that commitment of 3 years. And what John Lynch said was that, whether it's the travel, the being away from his family, just the time constraints, he said he didn't want to speak for Brian, but there are other things pulling at him. He had to make a tough decision, but one that he thought was best for him and his family. So Mick Lombardi, the former Raiders offensive coordinator, takes over as the quarterback's coach. Okay, so that's kind of the rundown. A lot more stories at NBC Sports Bay Area if you want to check all those out, about other things that John Lynch talked, and maybe a little bit more of the context of what happened when John Lynch spoke to the media. So the scouting combine is in full force. The workouts start. I'm going to be heading home to be back with my family, with my own family, and be watching from afar. So it is a strong class. I was able to talk to some of the defensive linemen on Wednesday. Today, I'll be interested in some of the defensive backs and the tight ends, because on my last mock draft, I had Tyler Warren going number 11 to the 49ers, the Penn State tight end. And you know what? The more I think about it, the more I like that pick. So tell me if you don't like it. A lot of you already have, but also a lot of people have said why they do like that pick of Tyler Warren at number 11. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't even last that far, but they can pick up offensive line later. They can pick up defensive tackles later, defensive linemen in general later. But that's kind of the quick rundown on a Thursday morning from Indy. So anyway, once again, if you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a comment, a like, and that is it for now.